The city had already slipped into its midnight hush when Daniel Carter, a self-made millionaire widowed far too young, pulled into the driveway of his sprawling estate. The mansion's windows glowed faintly against the dark, a picture of calm and order. After a long week of negotiations, Daniel wanted nothing more than to kiss his infant son goodnight and feel, if only for a moment, that he still had a family. He entered quietly, the soft click of his shoes echoing across the marble floor. The house smelled of lavender polish and faint baby powder. All seemed peaceful. But as he walked toward the nursery, he heard a sound that stopped him cold, not the thin, tired cry of his son Ethan's wail that he knew too well, but something softer, rhythmic. A low hum, a lullaby carried on a woman's trembling voice. Daniel pushed the nursery door open and froze. The rocking chair by the window creaked gently. In its curve sat Isabella, the young maid, who had come only weeks before, hired to help keep the household running after the tragedy of his wife's death. Her dark hair fell loose around her face, her eyes closed, her voice humming a tune too tender for words. In her arms, pressed close to her chest, was Ethan, and the child was nursing. Daniel's heart stuttered. His briefcase slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a thud that seemed deafening in the small room. Isabella's eyes flew open. Color drained from her face. She froze, caught in a moment that could not be explained away. Ethan stirred but did not cry. His tiny hand clutched her blouse, his breath, even his body calm for the first time in days. Daniel's mouth went dry. Anger, confusion, disbelief all crashed into him at once. "What are you doing?" His voice was low, sharp, raw. Isabella's lips parted, but no words came. Tears brimmed instantly in her eyes. She looked down at Ethan, still nestled against her, then back at Daniel, her voice breaking. He wouldn't stop crying. He was starving. I didn't know what else to do. Daniel took a step closer, his chest heaving. "You think this is acceptable, to take my son into your arms?" His voice faltered as his eyes landed on Ethan's face. For the first time in nights, the baby wasn't screaming. His cheeks were flushed but peaceful. His tiny mouth suckled contentedly, his eyes half closed in sleep. The sight pierced Daniel's fury like a blade. Still his voice thundered. "Put him down. Now." Isabella's tears spilled freely. "Please, don't be angry. I swear I meant no disrespect. He was in pain. I couldn't bear it. I thought if he felt a mother's comfort, even if it wasn't hers, he might rest." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. A mother's comfort. The phrase reopened wounds that hadn't healed since the day his wife died, bringing Ethan into the world. The nursery felt smaller, the air heavier. The walls seemed to lean in, demanding a verdict. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides as he stood between rage and reason. His son's soft sighs echoed louder than any defense Isabella could offer. In that moment, Daniel Carter, the man who thought he had seen everything life could throw at him, realized he had never been less prepared, because nothing could have braced him for the sight of his maid nursing his baby. Long before the shocking scene in the nursery, grief had carved its way into Daniel Carter's life like a relentless tide. Only 6 months earlier, the mansion that now echoed with silence had been filled with laughter. His wife, Grace, radiant even in her final months of pregnancy, had glided through its halls, her hand resting gently on the curve of her belly. She dreamed aloud about Ethan's future, the toys he would love, the schools he would attend, the kind of man he might become. But childbirth is a battlefield, and not everyone survives it. Grace's final cry in the delivery room was followed by Ethan's first. Daniel held his son with trembling hands, even as his world crumbled. The doctors spoke gently, but the words shattered him. Grace had not made it. From that day, the mansion became a shell. The chandelier still sparkled. The walls still gleamed, but Daniel saw only shadows. Each corner whispered of Grace. Each sound reminded him of what he had lost. And every time Ethan cried, Daniel's heart ached with guilt. The child was both his greatest treasure and the living reminder of the price his wife had paid. At first, Daniel tried to manage it all alone. He worked by day, rocked Ethan by night, and lived on caffeine and sheer will. but exhaustion carved hollows beneath his eyes, and his company board began to worry. Hire help, they urged. You can't raise a newborn and run an empire alone. That was when Isabella arrived. She came not as a professional nanny, but as a housemaid recommended by a friend. She was quiet, diligent, and seemed to melt into the background. Her dark eyes held a sadness Daniel couldn't quite place, but he didn't ask. He only needed someone to manage the house so he could keep breathing. What Daniel didn't know was that Isabella carried her own grief. She had once been a mother too. A year earlier, illness had claimed her infant daughter. No amount of prayers or medicine had saved the child. The loss hollowed her, leaving her wandering through life with an ache no words could fill. When she first held Ethan just to soothe him, while Daniel rushed to a meeting, something stirred in her chest. His cries pierced her, echoing the ones she could no longer hear from her own child. Every time she rocked him, a piece of her broken heart softened. But Ethan was not an easy baby. Since Grace's death, he cried endlessly, refusing bottles, rejecting formula, restless in every embrace. Nurses said it was colic. Others whispered it was grief, that even an infant could feel the absence of a mother. Isabella tried everything. She sang lullabies her own mother had once sung. She walked him around the halls, whispering gentle reassurances. Nothing worked. The baby wailed, his small body trembling with need. One night, as Ethan's cries reached a fever pitch, Isabella pressed him against her chest, tears streaming down her own cheeks. The ache of her lost child and the sight of this motherless boy collided within her. Against reason, against caution, she did the unthinkable. She offered him the comfort she once gave her daughter. To her astonishment, Ethan quieted. His cries subsided into whimpers, then sighs, then silence. For the first time in weeks, he slept soundly, a small fist resting against her heart. From then on, Isabella carried the secret alone. Each time, Ethan broke into inconsolable screams. When bottles failed and rocking proved useless, she gave him what no one else could. She told herself it was temporary, that it was survival, that it was mercy. But deep inside, she knew it was also the only way she could feel like a mother again. When Daniel opened the nursery door that night, he didn't just stumble upon an act of desperation. He stepped into the collision of two griefs, his own as a widowed father and Isabella's as a mother who had lost everything. The belt of silence in the nursery snapped the moment Ethan let out a soft sigh and drifted deeper into sleep. Daniel's fury flared again, tangled with confusion, and something else he refused to name. He reached forward, lifting his son carefully out of Isabella's arms. Ethan stirred, but did not cry. His tiny face rested against Daniel's shoulder, peaceful for the first time in weeks. The paradox of the moment twisted inside him, anger that Isabella had dared to cross a line, and undeniable proof that her act had soothed his child when nothing else could. "Get out," Daniel hissed, his voice raw. Isabella's tears welled. "Mr. Carter, please. I didn't mean any harm. I only wanted to help him." "Help?" Daniel snapped, tightening his hold on Ethan. "What you did was reckless, dangerous, unforgivable." She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "He was starving, sir. He wouldn't take the bottle, and his cries, they tore through me. I couldn't bear it. I only wanted him to rest." Daniel's chest ached, but his anger would not release its grip. He pointed toward the door. "Leave. Now." Isabella's sobs broke through the nursery. She bowed her head, placed a trembling kiss on Ethan's tiny foot, and slipped quietly from the room. The next morning, Daniel found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror. Hollow-eyed, he hadn't slept. Ethan's calmness in Isabella's arms haunted him like a cruel reminder. He tried bottles again, called in 2 nurses, even tried a new brand of formula. Ethan rejected them all, crying until his voice grew hoarse. By midday, the mansion buzzed with whispers. One of the housemates had overheard the argument in the nursery and shared it with another. By evening, half the staff seemed to know. Secrets in wealthy households seldom stayed contained. Was Daniel neglecting his child? Had he hired Isabella for more than housekeeping? Anonymous sources claimed the maid had manipulated her way into his trust. By the following morning, Daniel's phone was flooded calls from investors, messages from board members, and even veiled threats from competitors. His reputation, his company's image, and the legacy he had fought to protect all hung in the balance. In the midst of the chaos, Melissa, the official nanny Daniel had employed on recommendation, stepped forward. Her eyes wide with feigned outrage, she exclaimed, "I always knew something was off about that girl. She's dangerous, sir. What she did, it's not only improper, it's criminal. You should dismiss her at once before she brings more shame on this family." Her words dripped like venom, each syllable fanning the flames. She painted Isabella as a manipulator, a desperate woman seeking to replace Grace, the beloved wife Daniel had lost. Daniel clenched his fists. He wanted to agree to slam the door on the entire scandal. But then Ethan's cries pierced through the hall again, sharp, insistent, unrelenting. Melissa rushed to scoop him up, but the baby only screamed louder in her arms. Bottles failed. Rocking failed. Hours passed, and Ethan's sobs turned desperate. When Isabella, still lingering by the servants' quarters with her packed bag, heard the cries, her heart shattered. Against her better judgment, she stepped into the hallway. Her eyes pleaded silently with Daniel. "Please," she whispered, "just let me hold him one more time." Melissa scoffed. "Don't listen to her, sir. She's the reason you're being mocked in the papers. She wants to take your wife's place." Daniel hesitated, torn. His son's wails grew weaker and raspier. His arms trembled as he tried once more to soothe Ethan, but nothing worked. His pride screamed to push Isabella away, to protect his reputation. But Ethan's suffering drowned out everything else. Slowly, reluctantly, Daniel extended the child toward her. Isabella's arms enfolded Ethan with a tenderness that silenced the hall. Within moments, the baby's cries subsided into hiccups, then into quiet whimpers, and finally into calm breaths. His tiny fingers clutched at her blouse as his body went limp with relief. The room fell utterly silent. Melissa's face twisted with indignation. Daniel's board members might rage, the tabloids might mock. But in that instant, only one truth mattered: his son had found comfort where no one else could give it. Daniel's heart pounded as he watched. For the first time, doubt cracked through his anger. Maybe what Isabella had done wasn't madness. Maybe it was mercy. But mercy had a cost, and the world was watching. The silence that followed Ethan's sudden calm was deafening. The baby lay nestled against Isabella's chest, breathing softly, as if the storm of cries had never happened. Daniel's heart twisted painfully at the sight. Melissa, her arms crossed tightly, broke the quiet with venom. "Do you see? She manipulates him. This is not natural. She's trying to make him depend on her, so you'll be forced to keep her around." Daniel shot her a sharp glance, but his mind churned. His pride screamed to believe Melissa the nanny, with polished credentials and glowing recommendations. Yet the evidence before him was undeniable. Isabella soothed Ethan when no one else could. Still, the scandal in the tabloids and Melissa's accusations weighed heavily on him. Daniel couldn't ignore them. He ordered, "Enough. Both of you leave me. I need time to think." Melissa obeyed, smugly whispering as she passed Isabella. "Your days here are numbered." The tabloid headline glared up from his phone screen: "Millionaire's household scandal made crosses boundaries with infant son." His reputation trembled. His investors demanded answers. But all he could hear were Ethan's cries and the silence that followed when Isabella held him, frustration mounting. Daniel opened his laptop and began reviewing the household surveillance logs. He hadn't intended to spy on anyone, but desperation clawed at him. He needed the truth. Hours passed as he scrolled through footage. Most showed mundane routines: maids dusting deliveries at the door, Melissa strolling through the halls with a phone glued to her ear. But then something caught his eye. Footage from the nursery days before. Ethan lay in his crib wailing. Melissa sat nearby, scrolling through her phone earbuds and paying him no attention. 10 minutes passed. 20. The child's cries grew weaker, his tiny fists flailing. Still, Melissa didn't move. Then the door cracked open. Isabella peeked in her face, etched with worry. She crossed the room, lifted Ethan tenderly, and rocked him until his sobs softened. Melissa finally looked up, annoyance flashing across her face, before waving dismissively and leaving the room. Daniel's stomach knotted. He clicked to another day, another clip. The pattern repeated. Melissa neglecting, Isabella intervening. Time after time, the nanny paid to care for his son turned her back, while the maid he barely noticed became the only one Ethan could count on. And then came the clip that shattered the last of his doubts. Ethan lay feverish in his crib, his cries hoarse. Melissa tossed a bottle onto the table and muttered into her phone, walking out without a backward glance. Isabella rushed in minutes later, panic etched on her face. She pressed a hand to Ethan's forehead, gasped, and cradled him close. The camera caught her whispering desperate prayers, tears streaming down her cheeks as she rocked him through the night. By dawn, she was still there, her head bowed, exhaustion heavy on her shoulders. But Ethan's fever had broken. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the footage replaying in his mind like a knife twisting deeper. Melissa, the professional, had been negligent at best, dangerous at worst. Isabella, the quiet maid with no obligation, had saved his son more than once. A bitter laugh escaped his throat. I nearly destroyed the only person who has truly protected Ethan. The next morning, Daniel summoned Melissa to his office. She swept in her expression falsely sweet. I assume you've come to your senses, sir. That girl is a liability. Fire her, and I'll ensure the tabloids forget this ever happened. Daniel's eyes were cold steel. Sit. Melissa obeyed, confusion flickering. Daniel turned the laptop toward her. The footage played the crying child, her neglect, and Isabella stepping in. Clip after clip. Melissa's face drained of color. Explain this, Daniel demanded. Melissa stammered, I was busy. Instead, you abandoned him. While Isabella, his voice cracked, while she gave him the only comfort he's known since his mother died. She's manipulating you, sir. She's trying to replace Grace. Can't you see? Daniel's fist slammed the desk. Enough. The only thing I see is the truth. You endangered my son. Pack your things. You are finished here. Melissa's face twisted with rage, but she dared not argue further. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Daniel sat back, running a hand over his face. His anger toward Isabella had not fully faded, but now it was mingled with something heavier, shame. Shame that he had doubted her. Shame that he had nearly cast her out when she had been the one saving Ethan all along. He glanced toward the nursery where his son slept peacefully. For the first time in weeks, Daniel realized the conflict ahead wasn't just about scandal or pride. It was about confronting his own blindness and deciding whether he had the courage to make things right. The mansion, once alive with Grace's laughter, felt colder than ever. Melissa's absence should have brought relief, but instead the silence pressed down heavier than stone. Daniel stood in the nursery doorway watching Ethan sleep. The child's tiny chest rose and fell peacefully, but Daniel's heart churned with unrest. His mind replayed the footage again and again, Isabella's tears as she prayed over Ethan, her soft lullabies, her arms holding the boy when no one else could comfort him. And then the memory of his own words, leave, now. He had cast her out like a criminal. By dawn, whispers spread among the staff Isabella had left the estate. No forwarding address, no note, just gone. Daniel buried himself in work to dull the ache, but nothing eased it. At meetings, he heard board members muttering behind his back. On the news, talking heads debated his household scandal, questioning his fitness as both a father and a leader. Shareholders called nervous. Control the narrative, they urged. Show the world you're in charge. But when Ethan grew sick one night, his cries cutting through the halls, none of that mattered. Daniel tried everything. Bottles pacing lullabies whispered through a throat unused to singing. Nothing worked. The boy's face flushed, his tiny fists beating the air in agony. Please, son, Daniel begged, his voice breaking. Tell me what to do. The helplessness crushed him. His wealth, his power, his reputation, none of it mattered against the tears of a child. For the first time, he admitted to himself he couldn't do this alone. Days later, the breaking point came. Ethan's cries turned into wheezing gasps. His small body burned with fever. Panic tore through Daniel as he rushed his son to the hospital. Machines beeped, nurses rushed, doctors murmured in low voices. Daniel hovered helplessly beside the crib, his hand gripping Ethan's. Fear consumed him, the same fear he had felt the night Grace died. What if he lost Ethan too? Mister Carter, the doctor said gravely, your son refuses every feeding attempt. His body's weak. If we cannot stabilize him soon, we may face the worst. The words struck Daniel like lightning. He stumbled back, his world tilting. He had faced hostile takeovers, billion-dollar losses, ruthless rivals. but nothing compared to the terror of losing his son. And then, through the haze of grief and guilt, one truth screamed louder than all others: Isabella. She was the only one who had ever calmed Ethan, the only one who had given him strength. Daniel's pride had driven her away, and now his child's life hung in the balance. With desperation clawing at his chest, Daniel made his decision. He handed Ethan back to the nurse, his voice hoarse. "Keep him stable. I'll be back." "Where are you going?" "To find the woman who saved my son," Daniel whispered. "The only one who can save him again." Daniel drove through the night, scouring every corner of the city. He visited the modest boarding house Isabella had once mentioned, but the landlady only shook her head. She left days ago, said she needed work somewhere else. Poor girl didn't even take much with her. Rain lashed against the windshield as Daniel tore down streets he hadn't driven in years. He asked at churches' soup kitchens, anywhere someone like Isabella might seek refuge. Each time people shook their heads. Finally, in a quiet corner of the city, Daniel spotted her. Isabella sat outside a dimly lit cafe, her worn coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her face tired and pale. A small suitcase rested by her feet. She looked smaller, somehow fragile, but her eyes still held the same quiet strength. Daniel pulled over so abruptly that the tires screeched. He stepped into the rain, his suit clinging to him instantly. Isabella looked up startled, then froze as recognition dawned. "Mr. Carter," her voice was barely audible. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of her, the rain mixing with the tears he could no longer hold back. "Isabella," he choked out, "I was blind. I was proud. I cast you out when you were the only one who cared for my son." And now his voice broke. "He's dying. Please, please come back and save him. Ethan." "He needs you," Daniel whispered, his voice desperate, raw. "He needs you more than he needs me, more than he needs anyone." The cafe lights flickered against the rain-slick street as Isabella stared at him, stunned. She had never seen the mighty Daniel Carter like this, stripped of power, humbled and begging. Her heart pounded. She thought of Ethan's soft fingers clutching her blouse, of his cries that echoed her own lost child's, of the bond she could not deny. Slowly she stood, lifting her suitcase with trembling hands. "Take me to him," she said. And in that moment, the storm within Daniel's soul broke. For the first time he felt hope. The rain had not yet stopped when Daniel and Isabella rushed through the hospital doors. Daniel's clothes clung to him, but he didn't care. All he saw was the pale face of his infant son visible through the glass of the NICU ward. Ethan's tiny body lay hooked to monitors. His chest rose and fell shallowly, each breath a fragile battle. Nurses whispered in urgent tones. The doctor spotted Daniel and approached with grave eyes. "Mr. Carter, his condition is worsening. He refuses every feeding attempt. We're running out of options." Daniel's throat tightened. He turned toward Isabella, whose hands trembled as she clutched her coat. Her eyes brimmed with tears at the sight of the baby she had once cradled, soothed, and kept alive. "Please?" Daniel said, his voice raw. "You're the only one who can help him. Will you?" For a moment, Isabella hesitated. Fear, shame, and doubt swirled within her. She had been condemned, cast out, painted as a villain in the papers. But then Ethan let out a faint, hoarse cry, his tiny arms flailing weakly. The sound pierced her heart like an arrow. Isabella nodded, her voice steady, though her hands shook. "Yes, for him." The nurses watched uncertainly, but the doctor gave a reluctant nod. Daniel stood outside the glass, his fists pressed to the frame, praying silently. Isabella approached the crib, her tears already falling. "Oh, little one," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here. I'll never let you cry alone again." She lifted Ethan gently, her movements careful and reverent. His small body trembled against her chest. She held him close, humming the lullaby she had once sung to her own lost child. The same melody that had comforted Ethan countless nights before. At first he resisted. His cries were faint and broken, but Isabella's voice did not waver. Her heartbeat, steady and familiar, thudded beneath his ear. Slowly his tiny fists unclenched. His cries softened into whimpers, then into silence. His breathing steadied. His small hand reached up and clutched a strand of her hair. Daniel's chest heaved as he watched. His knees buckled and he sank into a chair, tears streaming unchecked. The monitors above Ethan's crib showed improvement, his heart rate stabilizing as oxygen levels rising. The doctor's eyes widened. He's responding. It's working. She rocked him, sang to him, prayed over him. And as the minutes ticked by, color returned to his cheeks and his body relaxed against her chest. When the doctor finally cleared his throat and said he's out of immediate danger, Daniel let out a sob of relief. He pressed his forehead against the glass, whispering, "Thank you, God. Thank you." Later, when Isabella emerged, her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes alight with fierce love, Daniel stepped forward. Without thinking, he fell to his knees in front of her. "I was blind," he said hoarsely. "I let my pride condemn you when you were the only one who saved my son. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Ethan needs you. Please stay, not as a maid, not as a servant. Stay as part of this family." For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes searching his. Then she shook her head gently. "I didn't do this for you. I did this for him. For the child who needed comfort when the world failed him. Whatever you ask of me, I will always answer for his sake." He nodded, tears still falling. "For him, and for us too. We'll rebuild from here." In the nursery, Ethan stirred in her arms, but did not cry. His face nestled against her, as if he had always known she was his anchor. And in that moment, Daniel knew the truth. Love is not bound by blood alone. Family was forged in sacrifice, in compassion, and in the courage to give when there was nothing left to give. Spring sunlight streamed through the wide hospital windows, scattering golden warmth across the floor. It was the first time in weeks that Daniel felt his chest unclench. Ethan lay in his crib cheeks, rosy tiny lips, pursed in contentment. Every so often his hand twitched as though reaching out in a dream. Isabella sat beside him, still humming softly. Her eyes were tired, but her face carried a peace Daniel had never seen before. Days passed and Ethan grew stronger. The doctors marveled at his recovery. "He's thriving now," one nurse said with a smile. "Sometimes it's not medicine alone, it's love." Daniel stood at the doorway, watching Isabella stroke Ethan's tiny hand. The sight filled him with gratitude so fierce it hurt. He thought of Grace, his late wife, and whispered silently, "I failed once, but I won't fail him again." When Ethan was discharged, Daniel insisted Isabella sit in the back seat with the baby. She hesitated, but Ethan clung to her blouse, refusing to let go. She smiled weakly, and Daniel's heart swelled. Back at the mansion, change began immediately. The halls, once heavy with grief and scandal, slowly filled with life again. Daniel no longer sat isolated in his study with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Instead, he joined Isabella in small routines, feeding Ethan, tidying the nursery, walking through the gardens as the baby gurgled in her arms. One evening, Daniel carried a vase of sunflowers into the dining room. Their golden heads bobbed cheerfully, catching the evening light. Isabella paused, startled. "Sunflowers," Daniel nodded, setting them on the table. Grace loved them. She said they always turned toward the light, no matter how dark the night had been. His voice softened. "That's what you've done for Ethan. For me." Isabella's eyes shimmered. She brushed a tear away quickly, whispering, "I only did what a mother would do." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. He looked at Ethan, then back at her. "You've given him a mother's love when he had none. No fortune could ever repay that." The tabloids lost interest, their scandal replaced by fresher prey. But inside the Carter home, something stronger grew. An unshakable bond forged in the fires of grief and sacrifice. One Sunday, Daniel invited the staff and a few close friends for a simple dinner. No gala, no flashing cameras, no journalists, just family. Evelyn's old recipes were revived. Laughter rang across the table, and Ethan sat in his high chair giggling as Isabella fed him mashed carrots. At the end of the evening, Daniel stood raising his glass of water rather than wine. "Tonight," he said, his voice steady, "I want to honor the woman who saved my son. Not once, but countless times. She came to this house as a maid. But she has become more than that. She is family, and she will be honored as such from this day forward." Gasps echoed softly. Isabella lowered her gaze, tears spilling down her cheeks. But when she looked up, she saw nothing but warmth in Daniel's eyes. Later, after everyone left, Daniel walked Isabella to the garden. The sunflower stalks they had planted weeks earlier now stood tall, their faces turned toward the setting sun. He paused beside them. "Look," he said quietly. "Even in fading light, they still know where to turn." Isabella touched one of the blooms gently. "Because they remember the sun." Daniel's throat tightened. He placed a hand over Ethan's head, then looked at Isabella with quiet conviction. "And we will remember too. We'll turn toward the light, always." For the first time in a long time, the mansion did not feel empty. It felt like home. Family is not only written in blood, it is written in love, sacrifice, and the courage to protect. True wealth is not measured by fortune, but by the peace found in a child's laughter and the bonds that endure through grief. Like sunflowers, we must always turn toward the light, no matter how dark the night may be.